Looks
Okay,
like
welcome again
Scott.
for everybody to this month's Web Tips. Lance Yoder here from Clear Process Solutions. This month we're going to be talking about some transaction details. And let me go ahead and get some information up and we can go ahead and take a look at what we're going to be doing today. All right, so for those of you who haven't joined us before, our Web Tips is a fast-paced webcast series to provide tips and tricks for all of our Winshuttle products. Each month we do some tips on some Winshuttle product. Every other month it's on forms and workflow, and the other months it's on the desktop tools. And like I said, today we're going to be talking about some items on transactions. Let's take a look at what we're going to do. Today we're going to talk about two things: navigating SAP screens and beware of the copy from. So we're going to try to handle both of those things in just a short series today, try to get it all in within a half hour. And we're going to be using the same transaction scripts to go through both examples. So when we talk about navigating SAP screens, it's pretty straightforward when using transaction. You go through your business process, you go from screen to screen, just like you normally would. Except when you're doing with that same action with Winshuttle, you want to be very careful about the actions that you're taking and be very specific about those actions. Try to use buttons or icons on the screen to do the navigation instead of hitting enter. Now, oftentimes when you're going through a T code to get to the next screen, you'll just hit enter because you know what's coming next. So in the examples we're going to be talking about today on navigating the SAP screens are just some examples to be cautious about. Instead of using the enter button, maybe use something a little bit more precise to direct SAP where you want to go. So what we're going to be talking about is having you tell SAP where to go to the next screen instead of allowing SAP to determine where it thinks you want to go, because that can often mess up your recording in some cases. In the copy from, we're going to take a look at a material master example, and this applies to other objects as well, but we're going to just be focusing on material master for both of these examples and understanding the challenges, the benefits as well of using a reference material or a reference object, if you're creating a customer, copying from another similar customer. So we'll be going through those topics here today. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to look at would be, let's open our transaction scripts for the month. Let's take a look at the basic material master copy from situation. Okay, it looks like I'm going to have to close transaction because I was logged into somebody else's network right before I got started. So we'll go ahead and restart transaction. Okay, now the transaction came up and we're in the right environment. Let's go ahead and open our script again. In this example, we're going to be doing an MMO1 to create a new material by copying from another material. So we'll just go ahead and do this step by step. Let's bring up the Excel file so we can see what we're going to be getting ourselves into. Now, this recording is fairly simple. I've done a little bit of recording here. The only thing I'm bringing in is my material that I'm going to be using or be creating. There's nothing else. I'm going to just use whatever's on the screen. So just to keep it a simple recording. So in this case, we're going to be creating a material and we're going to be copying from another material. So let's go ahead and just walk through one item here step by step so we can see really what's going on. All right, looks like we're getting logged into our environment here, and we should be playing back momentarily. Okay, of course it's on my other screen, so we'll bring that over. All right, so you can see we have our material that we're creating. Just number 8 here, and we're copying from a number 1. I'm going to go ahead and hit Select Views. And we're going to pick Basic Data 1, and then go on into the material. Okay, so just one thing to note here. On this particular case, I am specifically picking the view that I want to go to next. So you can see the OK code here says SP02. So within the material master, that means go to tab 2. And instead of on the first screen, I could have picked Basic Data 1 and 2 and selected both views. But in this case, I chose to select just the Basic Data view. And then once I'm in the material, I'm going to navigate through the views that I want. I could have selected both at the beginning and then use the Enter key to navigate through, and that's going to be the next example, but we'll see how this works. So again, we're copying from a material, so we have all of this information here as well. And we're just going to go to Basic Data 2, going to Additional Data to update material description in French. And then we're going to go into the classification view to start adding some information just real simply. Okay, so you can see we're picking a particular class, and we're just going to enter some information. And go through many of these other plant views. Okay, so nothing real fancy here, but you can see I'm using the OK code up here. SP14 is going to go to the MRP3. So you can see as part of this process, I'm specifically telling SAP where to go, which is part of the navigation tip that we're doing today. So instead of pre-selecting all the views and using Enter to get through all of them, selecting one initial view and then navigating within that is the preferred method. Okay, so once that comes up, we're going to take a look at the material we just created. All right, looks like it's thinking about creating my material. Okay, so hopefully we had success. We'll go in here and take a look at our material to see what happened. All right, so not only were we talking about navigating within the screen. So again, I mentioned specifically picking the tab you want to go to instead of allowing SAP to determine where it thinks you want to go next. So let's also dovetail into the topic about using a reference material. So as you saw in this case, we used a reference material at the beginning. We copied from another material just to keep it simple. And let's show you some of the risks that happen when you do that. Okay, so I added my French description. However, when you're copying from another material, you want to be very careful because sometimes things can come over unexpectedly that you weren't looking to copy from the beginning. Now, I didn't go into the units of measure screen. So if you were looking at the screen, you didn't see me go into the units of measure screen as we went step by step. But if we go over to the units of measure, you see that somehow there's an alternate unit of measure here for box. And if we were to go look at our reference material, I think we use number 1 here. We can see that sure enough, our reference material had the alternate unit measure of box. So even though we didn't go to this tab, because we went into the additional information section, our additional data section during our recording, it copied everything out of the additional data. All of these tabs would have had information copied, including internal comments. Any of those items, if it had values on the reference material, would have been pulled in. So again, you want to be very careful about what you copy. Not only does it apply to the additional data, but on the material classification as well. So during the recording, let's get back to the material that we created. On the classification view, we have the 001 class. If the reference material that we copied from also had class information, even if it was a different class type, maybe 023 or 300, something like that, because we went into the class tab of this material, it copied all of the characteristics from the reference material, whether we thought that was happening or not. So again, you want to be very careful about what you're using for a copy material. All right, so let's move on, continue on with this topic about navigating. Now let's open up the next script and let's review. Yep, we'll save that. We'll go ahead and select multiple views. So in this case, instead of just selecting the basic data view and then going into the material, we're going to select the multiple views at the beginning and use Enter to navigate through those screens. All right, so we'll take a look at how this is going to pan out. Let's open up that Excel sheet. Make sure we have information ready to go. All right, again, very, very simple, just putting in a material, copying from another one. And we'll go step by step on this. All right, so here we have our material. Let's finish filling in the material. It sometimes helps. Okay, in this case, we're putting in basic data 2 and basic data 1, and we're pre-selecting those items. Okay, so those are the two views we want to create in this case. And everything should work out. Okay, basic data 2. We hit enter again because we got to the last screen. We're going to get this prompt because we didn't specifically hit the save button. We just hit enter and we got to the last screen. It's asking us if we want to save. So we'll go ahead and do that one more time because I forgot to point out the OK code to show that we were hitting enter. So we'll go ahead and run that on the next material. Okay, I'll finish filling this in since I didn't do that in the mapping. Select my two views and then hit enter. So previously I would hit the checkbox, now I'm just hitting enter. You can see in the OK code, in the previous recording it had equals SP02, which told SAP to select specifically the second view, the basic data view. In this case, I'm just hitting enter. You can tell that I've pre-selected the views at the beginning because of the little circles in the page, and they'll turn green once I've navigated to them. So in this case, I'm just hitting the enter key, and then I'm hitting the enter key again. The OK code is 00 again, which is hitting enter. And that's what happens in those cases. So in this case, instead of me telling SAP where to go, I'm using the enter button to allow SAP to navigate to where it thinks I want to go. So let's go into our settings. We're going to go look at a material, and I'm going to select sales org and make some of those my default views. Okay, because your end users oftentimes may have defaults, whether it's a default company code when you're creating a customer or doing invoicing. Oftentimes your end users, when they run these scripts, even though you might not have the default set when you develop it, the users may have when they run it. So you want to make sure you're accommodating those defaults. So in this case, I'm going to set that as my basic. I just wanted to go in, make sure I have those set appropriately. Now I'm going to run that again, same transaction script, where I'm using enter to navigate on the last material in my spreadsheet. And we'll see how this changes our recording a little bit. All right, so we have our material. Fill that out real quick. Okay, now notice my transaction script still selected basic data 1 and basic data 2. However, because my user defaults also had Sales Org 1 and Sales Org 2 selected. Those are still selected when I go into this. So it's still reading my user defaults as the runner. I would go in here and my OK code box went away. So at this point, Winshuttle is lost. It wouldn't know what to do, and you would get the famous no batch input found for screen, whatever the screen number is. So even though when you play it back, when your settings are, no default screens are selected, it works just fine. You put in multiple materials, everything's working. You hand it off to a user, and it doesn't work. Okay, so that's some of the problems you can encounter with navigating. And just to show that same issue on a different object, we'll go ahead and open up a different script for routings. So for those of you that work with routings, we'll do an example for you. Let's do routings with this one. Okay, let's see if I have any information in here in my spreadsheet. All right, looks like I'm going to be maintaining 2 materials. Let's go ahead and open the routing screen just so we can see what those look like in advance. Okay, so we have a routing here with just one operation for that routing. And all right, so what we're going to be doing in this script is we're just simply going to go in and update that work center. That's all we're going to do. So a simple update, really, again, just to show you navigation techniques. So let's go ahead and run that in step-by-step mode. All right, so we have our material and plant. We're going to update the routing. Okay, notice I'm hitting the enter button. So /00 again is the equivalent SAP recording of me hitting the enter button to navigate to where I want to go. So navigating through works just fine. I get to my routing. I update my cost center. If you remember, it was set to work center was 1114. Now it's been updated to 1115. I'll go ahead and save that. Works just great. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run that on the second material. All right, so the second material we're going to be dealing with is LY2. All right, so let's go ahead and set that up, row 3, and we'll see what kind of issues we can get into here. Okay, again, I'm just putting my material and plant, using the enter key on the keyboard to navigate through the screens. Okay, and I lost my OK code box. So again, you would have an error in this case because Winshuttle wouldn't know what to do with this screen. So why is this one different? So in the previous material, we went right into the operation listing to update, operation 10 to have a new work center. But in this case, this particular routing has 2 group counters where the previous one just had 1. So when I go into the routing screen for a material that has multiple group counters, it takes me to the routings screen. So let me bring up my other screen here. Let's go back. All right, so the WTLY1 material only had 1 routing. So you can see that there's only 1 group counter. So if I go into a routing that only has 1 group counter, as soon as I hit enter, it takes me right to the operation set. However, if it has multiple routings or multiple group counters, and I hit enter, it takes me to the overview for all the routings. Okay, so in this case, we again allowed SAP to navigate where it wanted to go instead of us directing where we wanted to go. So I'm going to go ahead and update that one material so we could see that it's updating again. Oops, the wrong T code. And we'll go ahead and revert that work center back. Hit save. Okay, and then we'll open up our next transaction script. We're going to select that one. Okay, let's go ahead and go through this one. Again, we're going to be doing the same, using the same data file with our materials. Let's go ahead and do step by step on these items. All right, so we still have the same material, WTLY1 in our plane, but in this case, instead of hitting the enter key where we had /00 before, now we're hitting some other button. In this case, this OK code was the resulting value of me pressing this button during the recording. So pressing the routings button. So instead of hitting enter to let SAP take me where it thinks I want to go, I'm using the routings button to specifically go to a particular screen. Okay, so when I hit the routings button, it takes me to the routings overview. In this case, because I only have one group counter, it's still just showing the one group counter, and I'm selecting the first one to update. So in our example here, very simple case, I'm just updating the first group counter of any material that I'm doing. So I select my first row, and then I'm hitting the operations button. All right, so that's this OK code is the result of me hitting the operations button during the recording, and I'm still going in there to update that work center. Okay, so I'm getting the same result, but instead of using enter, I'm directing it through the screens that I want to get that same result, because I know there are other scenarios, like if a material has multiple group counters, that I need to accommodate. So we're going to change our start row to start row 3, and then we're going to go through this one as well. So remember, this is the material that has multiple group counters, and we'll see how this change in direction by pressing the buttons instead of using enter, how that helps us navigate through the transaction. Okay, so again, using the button for routings, even though this one has 2 group counters, we're still taken to the same screen because that's where I directed SAP to go. Selecting the first record, going to the operations for that one, and updating it to Work Center 1115, and then saving. All right, so our 2 topics today, navigating SAP screens. The takeaway here is try to use functionality that's on the screen for you to explicitly direct SAP where to go. That you're going to be the most successful when doing your recordings in those cases. The enter key has its place. If you enter a value, you need to validate it, or hitting enter after you enter a value brings up another list of things, like in the classification view. By all means, use the enter key when appropriate. But when you're trying to navigate through the screens, one tab to the next, or different screens within a T code, you're going to be most successful by using the navigation features on the screen instead of using the enter key. So we saw 2 examples, one with Material Master and one with routings. Okay, so on the other hand, be aware of the copy from. That's what we talked about. When we're copying from another material or another vendor or another customer, whatever it may be, make sure you're aware of what you're actually copying when you're doing that recording. And also be aware of user defaults. So in that example, I had some views already selected, and it caused my transaction script to error out because I had Sales Org 1 and Sales Org 2 pre-selected as defaults, and I couldn't get through that because of my navigation. There are generally features on those T codes where you can clear out any sort of preset. So in this case, for select views, if I wanted to get rid of the default in my recording, I would simply select the deselect all and then select the view that I wanted during my recording. So you'd record yourself hitting that deselect all, or you'd record yourself going into the user's default settings, eliminating the company code if you're doing a customer or vendor or something like that. Okay, well, those are all the topics we had for today. Thank you for joining the November version of CPS Monthly Web Tips, and hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving. Our next session in December will be focused on workflow, so we hope to see you all then.